Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining me in the Locher Room on this Thursday, March 30th. I'm Alan Locher. The filmmakers and stars of Chrissy Judy, Todd Flaherty, and Wyatt Fenner are here today to talk about their new film about two best friends and what happens when one moves away, leaving the other behind to figure himself out. Chrissy Judy, hailed as one of the year's best films by Moviemaker Magazine, premiered at the 2022 Provincetown International Film Festival before going on to screen at over 30 festivals worldwide, including LA's OUTFest, NewFest, featured as the New York Centerpiece, the Hamptons International Film Festival, Out at the Movies International Film Festival in Winston-Salem, and London's BFI Flair. During its festival run, the film garnered several awards, including audience and jury awards for Best Narrative Feature, and received writing, directing, leading performance, and emerging filmmakers awards for Todd Flaherty. Chrissy Judy was acquired by Dark Star for theatrical and home entertainment release. The film will be released in Los Angeles tomorrow, with New York and San Francisco following a week later on April 7th, and video on demand on April 4th. Please help me welcome Todd Flaherty and Wyatt Fenner to the Locher Room. Gentlemen.
Hi.
Thank you both so much for being here. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
So happy to be here. It's great to see you again.
You as well. We met out at the Movies International Film Festival. As I said backstage, you guys have been traveling the world with this film. Talk about that experience of traveling, going out and seeing different audiences. Todd, you wrote it, you directed it, you star in it with Wyatt. You go first.
I just have to say, I feel like the Brady's right now. I want to be like looking up at Wyatt. Love it. I love the setup.
We're missing three. We're missing three kids.
Yeah, I know. That's okay. They're home somewhere. This experience has been unbelievable. I think I can't speak for everyone involved, but for me in particular, I had hoped that we would get into a couple film festivals. I had no idea that we would have the reach that we've had. And it's just every place we've gone. We were in Melbourne, we were just in London, we've traveled the country at this point, out west and back again, and north and south and all over. And I think the thing that's been most rewarding is just the audience reaction, and getting to see how universal this story is, and how it touches people. So yeah, did I ever imagine that we would have the reach that we've had? No. But I'm certainly glad that we did. And it's definitely been a life-changing year for me. And I think maybe for Wyatt too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Friendship is a universal theme.
Yes,
absolutely.
We can all absolutely 150% relate to that.
Yeah.
Actually, Wyatt, I was going to ask.
Beautifully. I wanted to add to what Todd said so beautifully. It's been so wonderful to experience audiences around the world taking in and appreciating the film. It's also been wild how many modes of transportation the two of us have experienced together at this point, from boats to trains to buses to flights to Australia to when we were in Atlanta, we were scootering all over Piedmont Park. And it's been aside from how thrilling it's been to share the film, it's also just been wild, the two of us just bosom buddying all over the country and the world. So I love that.
Yeah.
Well, a couple questions about those travels. Is there a favorite place you visited?
Wow. Every single place that we went to was really special and unexpected and thrilling ways. And every place we went to, we were welcomed by such interesting, curious film programmers and audience members. So it's impossible for me to say a favorite place, but I did really, really love last week. We, had the BFI Flair Festival, which at the end of such a full year, it was really, really fun to just traipse around London and take that in after all of the other travel.
I'm a big fan of London myself, so I get it. Yeah.
And it was a special time for reflection on everywhere we've been and how much we have to appreciate.
That's awesome. Was there a city or festival that surprised you the most of the reaction?
I actually have to say, where we met in Winston-Salem, I wasn't sure what to expect. We're
Mm.
just in a little bit of a tumultuous time right now politically in the US. And um, uh, I had never been, and I fell in love with it there. I just thought it was such a great city with really amazing people. And everyone was just like, it felt like there were a couple places that we screened that felt like camp, Wyatt has said before. And that was one of those places. It felt like everyone was just sort of like there together to have this like, summer camp experience. And the city was awesome, and the audiences were great. So that was, I think, just the most surprising, because I had no expectations and wasn't sure um, what it would be like there. But it was really wonderful.
I was definitely most surprised by our experience at the Hamptons International Film Festival, because that was one example of, we made this film as it is a queer story, but at Hamptons it was really so clear how universal the story is, because it's not a queer film festival. The audience is not a queer-based audience by any means, and also is made up of predominantly people that I wouldn't have necessarily anticipated finding out about Chrissy Judy were it not to have been placed in that festival. And the reception was staggering. These 60, 70-year-old women were gagged for the film, and they were talking to us afterwards about, I had this experience with one of my old best friends, and it means so much to me to relive this time that I went through. And that was really surprising and very, very cool. And the Hamptons
I
is
love
beautiful
that.
as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Well, Todd, as the writer, producer, director of the film, please describe the film in your words and your character, Judy.
So the film is about two best friends who are drag performers. And the film sort of takes a turn when one character, Chrissy, decides to break up the act and leave their hometown of New York City to pursue a romantic partnership in Philadelphia. And then the film sort of follows my character, Judy's journey to figure out who he is without his best friend. And I guess it's sort of like a coming of age, if you will, of someone who's like going through a bit of self-discovery without their best friend by their side.
And Wyatt, describe Chrissy in your words.
Well, Chrissy's experience is something that I know all of us have had our own versions of, which is at a certain point in your adult life, you start to recognize that as much as you love someone, your own growth and your own journey is not necessarily being positively influenced by the energy that you're investing in that relationship or those people. And to recognize the importance of being able to love someone, and also being able to, with as much grace and care as possible, step away from what could be described in an intense way as like maybe a codependent friendship. But in another way, it's just like someone who you rely on. You need to take steps in another direction and rely on yourself in order to realize what it is you deserve to achieve with that shift in your energy. And I think that the difficulty of that, it's both painful and empowering to move through these things, these areas of the unknown in our lives, especially at this a point in like proper adulthood, when you get out of your 20s and you really, it's really time to put on the big boy pants and step up.
Absolutely. Todd, where did the story come from? Was it
People often ask if
any
it's
connection to your life?
autobiographical. Yeah, I hesitate to say that it's autobiographical. I think, I had a 2 or 3 really formative relationships in my 20s that I wanted to focus in on and honor. I love queer cinema, and Wyatt's heard me say this a million times, but I feel like, we get like 2 or 3 types of stories in queer cinema, which is like your coming out story, or a story of unrequited love, or some sort of story of like our victimhood. And I had never really seen anything that focused in on chosen family and the importance of these friendships, especially as I had experienced them. and how formative they were. So I wanted to focus in on that. I did start writing this film in 2018, right after I left New York, my home of like 13 plus years, to pursue a romantic relationship in Philadelphia. So I guess that
Oh,
was
okay.
yes. So
Yeah.
I like to say that I've been a Chrissy in many relationships. I've been a Judy in many relationships, and yeah, I think the other part of this story is the story of a queer artist who is trying to make queer art for queer people. And that's where the element of drag really came into play. I didn't want to write about a writer or an actor. So I just thought like zeroing in on what it must be to be a drag performer and the level of artistry involved in that type of work would be something really interesting to explore. And how horrible that would be for someone like Judy to not only lose his best friend, but also lose a source of income and a creative partner and having to go on that journey of reinventing himself in that way too.
Absolutely. Do I have it right? You didn't do drag before the film?
No, so I had never done drag before the film. Wyatt hadn't either. It wasn't necessarily a prerequisite. I was hoping to find someone as brilliant as Wyatt, and if they had drag experience, it would be great. But it wasn't a necessity. Yeah, when I was writing it, I knew that I wanted to play Judy, and so I figured I should, take some lessons in drag. And so a good friend of mine who's an excellent drag performer, dolled me up one day and taught me how to do makeup. And then eventually I went and started working as a drag performer at this club for a couple weeks in Philly. So yeah, it's, it was a crash course, and it it helped me discover more of like Judy's life and struggle. And I have taken to drag and still will perform every once in a while just because I found so much fun and freedom in that performance aspect of like makeup and hair and wigs, and I just I discovered a love of drag through Chrissy Judy.
I love that. You talked about wanting to incorporate drag into the characters for both, but not having done it, where did the idea to bring that in come from in this particular story?
Yeah, I think when I was trying to cement these two people together, I thought them having an act together would be really great. And I think drag in particular is such a queer art form. And I don't know, I personally know just my struggles as a performer. I feel like oftentimes when I was coming up in New York, casting directors and agents would say like, well, I just don't know where you fit. And I think that a lot of queer performers feel that way in trying to break through to some more mainstream work with their art. And we're living in such a really fascinating time with drag where it's becoming more mainstream, or where it has become way more mainstream than it ever was before. But I really wanted to build these characters who were sort of like the queens who I knew coming up in New York, who didn't have the access that some people have today because of RuPaul's show and the Brule Brothers show. And I thought that it would be like a fun way to show someone just struggling to express their most authentic self.
Love that. Love that. You two knew each other before this film, correct?
Yeah.
Wyatt, how did you two meet?
The first time that Todd and I ever met was when we did a reading of a play together several years ago here in New York. And it was one of those moments where after the first table read rehearsal, I was like, that guy is so talented. And then we just got to become friends through that. It was only like a 2-week process or so.
Yeah.
So then we were, mutual fans, and we would accidentally bump into each other actually quite a bit around the city at random on Fifth Avenue.
It's the best part of New York City.
Yeah, and
it really is.
It was that sort of friendship where you have an appreciation for someone, but you're both so busy, working on your own projects. So a few years went by, and then we reconnected early in the pandemic when I left New York for the very first time, left my apartment on the Upper West Side for the very first time. My partner and I went to take a little getaway in P-Town in early fall of 2020. And fortunately, we spotted Todd on his bike when we were making our way to the Stop and Shop to get our groceries for the week. And
I know that Stop and Shop.
Of course. Yeah, we all. God bless it. And then so we hung out. We took a socially distanced walk on the beach, and it was a great reconnection. It was like many of the times before when we had bumped into each other on the street. We always had like a 20-minute catch up and wanted more time together. But then this gave us an opportunity to actually sort of spend an afternoon walking and connecting and catching up. And then shortly after that was when Todd asked me to do the first reading that I was involved of the screenplay, and then we made the movie. So
yeah, it was such a no-brainer for me. I mean, it was kind of funny because Wyatt was in town on vacation, and I felt bad asking him to read the script. And I think most writers can sort of, identify with this. Like when you're writing something, you think it's good, but you have no idea until you hear it out loud. And he's so talented. I was like, oh my God, I don't think he knows any of my work as a writer. And like, I'm going to just take a risk and ask if he wants to do a really small reading of this thing. We were just like, I think we had like pizza and wine and sat around a kitchen table with like 6 people, most of whom weren't actors. I just wanted to hear it out loud. And
Andrew read like 4 parts. My partner Andrew read a variety of bartenders, etc.
Is he an actor?
He's not an actor.
So that's even more.
He was wonderful.
He was fabulous, but he's not an actor.
Yeah, and then at the end of that reading, it was funny because a friend of mine who had been sitting in on many iterations of the script for like the previous 2 years, Wyatt and Andrew left, and he was like, oh my God, well, that's your Chrissy. I mean, like, you don't have to go any further, like, I was like, yeah, I'm going to beg him to do this. And he agreed to, and yeah, I think it really, I think our history together really, really shines through in the film. People often ask, like, if we're best friends in real life, and I'm like, no, we are. But like when we were shooting, I mean, that was really like our first day on set. I was like, wow, I mean, we haven't spent maybe more than like 4 or 5 hours together at a shot. So we really dug our heels in, and so to speak. Yeah, pun intended.
No pun or pun intended.
I mean, from day one, it was so clear for me how incredible this was going to be, because the exploration was just thriving so immediately. Like one of many things we shot on our first day was some footage of us on Fire Island on the beach, and it wasn't warm. Yeah, in fact, it was like today. Pretty darn cold out.
Yeah.
But we just slapped on our Speedos, and we made it work. And then from go, it was really the start of something clearly incredibly special.
That's amazing. Could you have imagined from that day one to where we are today?
It's so weird. Yeah, like, I mean, you hope.
Right.
Yeah.
But you never know.
I feel like I read the screenplay and I just recognized how incredibly talented, I mean, what a genius my friend is, and I thought, this is just incredible. It deserves to be seen by people. And then when you have the talent of Brendan, our cinematographer, who is just a visual genius, filmmaking is visual storytelling. When you have someone who's able to capture the experiences in the way that he was able to visually, it was really exciting to day by day start to get to see little bits of what was coming together. I don't know that I had any sense of what I expected or hoped, but I knew it was building up to something special, and now it's so thrilling to be in the situation that we're in now.
I think the other thing that
the day before it opens in Los Angeles. I mean, that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of Brendan, that was going to be my next question about this being a family affair. Brendan is Todd's brother. Talk about collaborating with your brother. You both did an enormous amount on this film.
Yeah.
So please,
it's funny because
talk about working with him.
Yeah, people will say like, "Oh, you wore so many hats," and like Brendan wore a lot of hats too. It's just we don't necessarily recognize how much goes on behind the camera when we sort of look at and appreciate film. Yeah, truly, what happened was in the fall of 2019, I had different investors and a different producer involved, and we had an entirely different creative team. Brendan works on Saturday Night Live, and we had done some small projects together, but I think when he knew that I was putting Chrissy Judy together, he thought that maybe that would be more, he wanted me to work with someone who had more experience. And we were putting together this team, and it was going really well until the pandemic. And unfortunately, our main investor pulled out, and it ended up being this blessing that made the film what it is today. I mean, I think that had we forged on, it wouldn't have had the success that it has. And a lot of that has to do with really just the energy that everybody brought to set in this. It was just like a very caring, loving set. And working with Brendan is easy. I think he and I both just like kind of read each other's minds. We have a little bit of a shorthand with how we want things set up, and I think everyone else involved was really treated that that process really preciously, because we didn't have really any money, so it was like we did maybe 2 or 3 takes of a shot, and we were like, okay, hope the lighting is right. I mean, it's so funny. There's a beautiful shot of Wyatt in the opening scene on Fire Island when the 4 friends are kind of initially together. And we were not working with a lighting kit. So we were kind of dependent on whatever lighting was available in the space where we were working, or natural sunlight. And the natural sunlight was just really hot on his face where he was sitting, but we had already shot other things, so we couldn't really maneuver him around too much. And suddenly this like gray cloud just graciously rolled over the sky. And we were like, okay, let's go. Let's get a take. And it ended up being the one that we used because he was brilliant in it. And he looked so gorgeous in it. So there was a lot of play involved on set that wouldn't have been afforded to us if we were, a crew of 12 or 15 with a producer who was like, "Come on, guys." So it was a really fun, incredible experience. And Brendan was the one who said, he and I shot a short film together in the summer of 2020 after I knew Chrissy Judy wasn't going to happen. And by that fall in 2020, he was like, let's just make this happen. Like, we can do it. You and I can do this with a handful of people, and we can just make this happen. And we did.
Yeah.
That's
Brendan's wife, Isabelli, also ran our sound. Todd and Brendan taught Isabelli how to run sound. And Isabelli is a genius dancer. There were moments where she was holding a boom mic, bent over backwards underneath a pile of rocks with 2 legs literally like in splits above water. We were like, "Isabelli, you doing okay?" And she was like, "Yeah, I'm fine." So it was
that's going to be the new requirement of sound people.
Dance background,
flexibility,
dance background.
Yeah, dance background for sure. Well, we talked a little about drag as an art form. I'd love both of your takes sort of on what's going on in our country and what you would say to the politicians who are trying to ban drag, or even ban drag from young kids seeing this beautiful art form.
Yeah, at this point, during the pandemic, when we all went inside and drag was one of several art forms that took to streaming, or like this platform, it was something that allowed people hope and joy in a really dark time. And now that we're in a place where people are able to gather together and be in clubs watching drag queens perform, or in libraries where children are able to watch drag queens read stories to them, denying the opportunity for people to come together and celebrate creativity, imagination, brilliance is, I think, so obviously nothing but an attempt to distract people from what actually is a problematic circumstance in our, well, there are many things, but there's a lot going on that, you know, I feel like we're being distracted from, and it's absurd. You know, Todd gathers people together, shows them movies, makes them laugh, introduces love affairs. You know, people like meet at these places and fall in love, and it's like taking that out of the social ecosystem is just completely absurd, and it doesn't make any sense whatsoever because it's not threatening anything or anyone. It's only inspiring beauty in the world. So I would say, well, I'm not going to use the language that I would say.
We can say F off. Well said, though. Seriously, Wyatt, that was beautifully said. Todd, anything to add to that?
Well, that was really beautifully said. The only thing that I would add to that is that, you know, drag is not something new. It's been going on for literally centuries, and it won't end. You know, it's just a form of expression. Whether that is, you know, to promote comedy or, you know, your visual art or whatever it is that you are trying to promote or express. So I don't think the drag is really going anywhere. I think it's unfortunate that, you know, trans people and drag performers are a target right now, but I think that we will push past this. And yeah, I agree with Wyatt. I think, you know, this thin veil of what these politicians are trying to hide behind is so transparent that I don't think most people are really putting up with it. So
they put as much effort into gun violence as they are putting into this ridiculousness. You know, we might save some kids' lives rather than pretend.
Yeah, I mean, without going on an entire tangent, this has to do with socioeconomics. I mean, the economic climate of our country right now is completely disastrous. And I think it's just, you know, the last gasp of a dying political party trying to reach onto anything that seems like something that they can continue to herd people into their nonsense. But I think that luckily what we do have in our favor is technology and a voice and an ability to communicate with one another this way. And I think that most people are able to see beyond the lies and see that there's a money trail that's keeping people, you know, trying to make these decisions. So hopefully we'll be able to move on from this nonsense soon. But until then, I hope that the girls keep, you know, clacking away.
Yeah. And to Todd's point, you know, I hadn't done drag before we worked on this project, but I was a really creative, imaginative child. And I remember, you know, the dress up chest was always my favorite PlayStation in preschool and in kindergarten. And I remember at kindergarten orientation, there was a dress up closet. And I was the only little boy that went in there, but I went in there with a bunch of girls, and Julia Scarborough, who was in London. Todd, this childhood friend of mine happened to be in London. It was wild. And we all put on gowns and we all, you know, walked out of the dress up closet and we're parading around. And I remember another mother at the orientation approached my mom and was like, "Is this okay? Like, should he be doing that?" And my mom, you know, my mom's amazing. She was like, "Yeah, it's great. Like, he's having a blast. He loves it." I had no sense of gender identity, you know, at
no
age.
Kid at that age does.
All I had a sense was of my own brilliance and an expression of it. So whatever form that's going to continue to take, we are all going to continue to be able to discover and embrace that one way or another.
And you know, sadly, there aren't moms across the board or dads who are as allowing of what your mom did and should be. I have some friends who have two young boys, and one of them, you know, shows up at a party and he goes right to the little girls whose house is closet, and their dads let him, you know, do whatever he'd like. And I find it so just refreshing. I mean, Absolutely. He hasn't made those choices that we all, the people are fearing they've made. He's just having a good time and expressing himself.
Yeah.
It's if we all understood that, kids would be in a better shape than sadly they are emotionally today, because we try to put everybody in a box and we shouldn't be.
Kids and adults alike. There's a lot of adults who need to get in touch.
But to offer some hope in there, I do think that we're so much further now than we ever have been before, and I think that's where a lot of the push is coming from, because it's an easy target. But I will say, like, seeing even my niece and nephew and like hearing how they express themselves and their emotions, it's it's comforting to know that even though it feels like there's a pushback, that we are moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
I think maybe that's my cis white privilege talking, but I still have hope.
I hope so. I mean, it always astounds me. I'm 56, and coming out for me was not what it is for, kids today. It took me a long time. I was out probably around 21, but out to a very select few. Kids are now, 14, 15, 10. They know, and they're telling people and are comfortable. And I think that there's nothing better than seeing that and witnessing that today.
Yeah.
And you would have too if you had the language for it and lived in a culture that was open and accepting.
If I had a Chrissy Judy film to see art, to see myself represented. I mean, that's the truth. I mean, I've said this before, like Glee for me was later in my gay life, but I watched it from beginning to end because the thought of that on television just made my heart sing, because there was nothing like that for me as a kid growing up. There was nothing. So it's really, and that's what I wanted to come back to, the queer cinema for both of you. And Todd, you mentioned that that's something you've been interested in. What was your introduction to queer cinema? Do you remember it specifically?
Yeah, it's so funny. A lot of people have been asking this, and I've been so like nervous to give this answer. And recently I was like, in bed and I couldn't go to sleep. And I was like, that's the answer. Just be proud of it. And it's The Birdcage. I think I remember seeing that when I was like 8 years old and just being so awestruck by seeing two men who loved each other and the life that they had, and just like the dress up and the fun. And I revisit that film like quite frequently because I think Mike Nichols' work in directing it is so unbelievable. And
I would love to see it again. I mean, first of all, that cast is just beyond.
And even the bravery of the studios to put Nathan Lane in that role, and for him to say, okay, I guess, this is my moment to like step out and make a statement here in my work. It's really, I mean, for 92, like it's pretty incredible.
But interesting that you prefaced it that you were afraid to say it. But I'm curious, in 92, I don't think there was a plethora of options either. Were there?
Yeah.
Like today, there is a lot more.
Right.
I would not say that, studios or even independent studios were putting out a lot of queer cinema in 92.
Yeah, I guess like the cinephile in me wants to say like Stranger by the Lake or something that it's like a little, a little more
for
riveting.
Sure.
Because it's I think I only hesitate to say it because it's such a commercial success and everyone's seen it, and I don't know that people think of it as queer cinema, but I mean, my God,
Well, for certain people, my answer will lift yours way, way up, and other people will understand the deep appreciation that I have for my iconic queer film. I came out young. I came out when I was in high school. I was 16 or so.
See, you're the one I'm talking about. Like that really is just incredible to me. I wish I knew I was, or I didn't even. There's no knowing when you don't know the words, because there are no words being expressed. But,
right.
Yeah. But I think I was in a position where I was able to come out to myself in a clear way very early, and then it was a matter of just being comfortable enough to have the conversation, which I was, and I recognize that that's very early in someone's life. But shortly after I came out, one day I came home from school, and my mom had gone to Tower Records, and she'd bought a whole big stack of gay DVDs, gay movies, and she said, she was going through them. She was like, I got these. I thought we could watch them together. They're all great movies. And they were An Early Frost and Torch Song Trilogy, Longtime Companion, Philadelphia. And then she lifted up one of them. She said, and this one has the girl from 90210 in it. And it was Trick. So my mom and I sat down one afternoon to watch Trick. And about 5 minutes in, when the Go-Go Boy says, my friends call me Beer Can, my mom sort of like quietly got up and left the room and started fixing dinner or something. But I love that movie. I love that movie. So I love all of those movies, but I love that movie specifically because I think of that, the gay rom-com and the specific relationship that I have with it because of that experience. And, someone say Trick, Birdcage, maybe they're not considered high art. I happen to consider them extremely high art because they're just so specific. They're so niche and wonderful. But that's definitely my answer.
Seeing ourselves represented anywhere was a, milestone, I think, in all of our world.
I used to go to
your mom. I mean, really, like, we really should be applauding. Like, that is a really beautiful thing to do for your son. I mean, if more moms really, I mean, my mom was very supportive. She didn't go out and buy me movies, but I was very lucky too to have somebody accepting. But I mean, there are a lot, we all know there are a lot of kids who just don't have that, and they don't understand, or they don't go to the trouble that your mom did. And I think that's to be noted. And Wyatt, on a separate note, I'm going to reach out to you after this because I sit on the board of an organization called Gay Sons and Mothers. And I would love to talk because I think that is perfect for them. So,
absolutely. I would love to discuss that. Yeah. I think Todd and I were both, very, very fortunate to be supported and loved in the open and understanding way that we were. You can't take it for granted. It's Alan Wells.
No. When you see what's going on, when you see what's going on in the world, you really can't take that for granted.
Yeah.
In any way, shape, or form. Todd, please talk about filming in, one of my favorite vacation spots in the world, Provincetown, for this movie, which I know is a special place to you as well, but to be able to bring your film there to shoot and then to premiere it at their film festival.
Provincetown has a really special place in my heart. I first went there in 2010 to do a play for the summer, and it's really where I was exposed to queer culture at large that I never had experienced before. I mean, up until that point, queer culture for me was going to Splash with my Twinkie boyfriend, and hitting the dance floor in New York, and so there was a whole world of artists and a history that I had never learned before from people who were only 10 or 15 years older than me, but I carried that with me for a long time, and I moved up there during the pandemic, and I think filming there was such an incredibly cathartic experience because I feel like I'm so precious about it. You want to bring the right people into the world of Provincetown because it is this very special, unique place. And so I wanted to try as hard as I could to capture my Provincetown, which I think we did. It's funny, there was some talk early on in the writing process of having the third act be shot in color because Provincetown is so beautiful and the light is so incredible there. And a lot of people were saying well, what does Provincetown look like in black and white? Can you capture the magic and the beauty of that space if it's devoid of color? But that was kind of the purpose of shooting in black and white is, amongst many other things, like taking away the color from our very colorful community. Um, and yeah, you know, really, like I've said a couple times before, this was such a low budget feature, and I had been living up there, so once we started to shoot up there, but you know, the town rolled out the red carpet. You know, everyone was like, "What do you need? What spaces do you need to shoot in?" And there were a couple places that maybe we, you know, shot in without permits and stuff. And kind of like, as my brother says, run and gun style. You know, like kind of guerrilla style, get in with the camera. But even
I'm sure
you
that's
know,
an SNL thing too.
yeah, totally. Even, you know, I think when we were there, like everything fell into place so perfectly for us. It's, you know, there were moments where I was like, okay, I have to chart the tides and make sure that we can, you know, shoot in these certain areas at certain times. And even without giving away much of the script, at the very end, there's a moment where we see a little critter on the beach and a fox, and everyone in the writing process was saying like, well, how are you going to do that? Are you going to get a fox handler? And I was like, oh, I'll figure it out. There's foxes in P-Town. And sure enough, in just this like perfectly magical way, we had just finished our wide take, and this little fox came to join us on our makeshift set. And I think it just like perfectly encompassed our entire experience shooting in Provincetown. And yeah, on top of that, I started to, you know, dive into the film community there. So I really wasn't sure if we were going to get into the P-Town Film Festival. It's a great festival. And and when we did, I was elated because I knew how much they would appreciate it. And it was really just starting there and premiering the film there really gave us the confidence to go on to all of these other festivals. We did OUTFest right after P-Town, and that would have been an incredibly intimidating, not as reassuring place to start, even though we got amazing reviews and press and had a great audience there. There's something about the community in P-Town that made us feel like we had a really special film. And I think we carried that energy to the rest of the festivals with us. And yeah.
The first time,
yeah.
The first time that we got to see the film on a big screen was at our premiere at the Provincetown Film Festival in an entirely sold out, in fact, oversold movie theater in Provincetown, and experiencing however audiences experience this film, they'll appreciate it. And I'm excited for people to have that opportunity. But people who have the opportunity in Los Angeles, San Francisco, and New York to experience the film in a cinema with other people, our getting to experience that for the first time at the Provincetown Film Festival was, it was mind blowing. It was such a wonderful, cool experience. And I felt also incredibly prepared to just continue to get to go and experience that in all of these other places. So that was one thing for me about, after shooting in Provincetown, going back to Provincetown for that festival. It was just so special.
Do you have a special relationship with Provincetown as well?
I do now. I mean, I think it's an incredibly powerful place. It's a powerful place for creative, imaginative, and magical thinking. And, you know, like I said earlier, I had never been to Provincetown before the first autumn of the pandemic. That was the first time I'd ever been there. And a playwright friend of mine had gone with his husband and their baby daughter, and he had given me a couple pointers, you know, but no, I'd never been. And Drew and I decided to, you know, get out of our apartment after a few months in, you know, and
to save yourselves.
You know, just it was like it was just the perfect time and the perfect opportunity. And we got up there, and it was, you know, it was early autumn, so it was that like witchy New England magical time. And it was what it is, which is this incredibly gorgeous, special place, but it also has a creative capacity to put things where they belong. And I think when you give yourself the freedom to step away from the rat race of your life and to, you know, allow space, allow time, allow like openness and breath, then incredible things happen. And Provincetown, particularly when you get to live there all the time, I think when you go for a dose of Provincetown, it really serves your spirit in a special way. And then, you know, it reconnected us and allowed like this journey to begin in its way. So yes, my answer is I have a very special connection with Provincetown.
Well, and I mean, you really expressed it that it is a magical place because you had never been. Reconnecting with Todd,
right,
to create this magical experience.
Yeah.
Chrissy Judy. So there's like,
and now, you know, now for us, I think anyone who goes there, it quickly becomes okay, so, you know, this time next year or sometime around this time next year, we'll be there. You know, like we're going to celebrate a very special birthday there this fall, all of us together. And, you know, yes, it's a wonderful spot.
Someone told me my first summer there, and I put this line in the movie, they said people come to P-Town to heal, create art, and to get into trouble. And I think that like perfectly encompasses the magic of the space and the community there.
Yeah.
I mean, my only fault with Provincetown, I wish it was closer for me.
Yeah. And I also think that's something that's so special about it, because anyone who's in Provincetown has gone through it's not the easiest place to get to.
You want to be there.
Yeah, we're all out there with appreciation.
No one's
like,
just passing through.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's not a pass through. Right. It's an effort. So if you're making that effort, you really want to be there.
And if you're there for a week, you know, 6 of those 7 days, you're going to see the other people who are there for the week on Commercial Street more than once. And in a lot of cases, you're going to become friends with those people. You know, it's just a really, really incredibly special place.
Anything I love that you just said that, because I am friends with people I've met there, God knows, 30 years ago, probably.
Yeah. I really do believe anything that takes hard work leads to the fruits of those labors. You know, the blossoms come when you put in the energy. P-Town's a perfect example of that.
Love that. Todd, the film tomorrow and then next week, what is your biggest hope that people take away from their viewing experience?
I hope that when people watch this, they reflect on an important friendship in their life that is either still a part of their life or maybe isn't, and that they just find some sense of gratitude for the relationship and wonder, and a sense of wonder and awe that the relationship existed in the first place. Because I think the heart of this story is to talk about how people come in and out of our lives, and how, regardless of like for how long they're there, their impact is something greater than just a coincidence. Chrissy and Judy have shaped each other's lives for the better. And the ending might be a little ambiguous, but I think that there's always space for people to, move in and out of each other's lives. So I hope that when people see the film, I hope they reflect on some really important, wonderful friendships that they've had, and honor those.
I love that. For both of you, where did your love of the arts begin? Did you, for Todd, did you always want to act, or did you want to direct? And Wyatt, for you, did you always want to act? Wyatt?
I think acting for me was always my first love. And I think, it's just because that's what I had access to. So, I sometimes tell this story. It makes me sound like a cheesy little kid, but I guess I was. I always thought I had magic powers that I didn't know how to harness, and so I would be like out in nature, and like I thought that I had magic powers that I didn't know how to like really get a handle over. And I remember the first time I saw a theatrical production, and I was like, "Oh, that's it. I do that."
Yeah.
Do you remember the theatrical production?
It was Into the Woods. And I was 5, and I just was like, I'm an actor. I just knew that about myself. And I started exploring it from there. And, where I grew up, we didn't really have access to theater until I was like in high school. So a lot of the work that I did was just making, little home movies with my brother and writing plays to put on in the backyard with our swing set as a stage. And I think my discovery of directing came later, and I'm so grateful that it did, because I love that my approach to the work is character driven. And I think that I don't know, I can't speak for people who I work with, but I think that it shows in performances. A lot of times people ask after the film, where did you find these great actors? I'm like, I know great actors. That is the blessing of my life. I've seen a lot of people produce work that falls short because they don't know how to talk to their actors, or they don't know how to find that like special thing in somebody. And yeah, I think that's where, my love of it just has always been with me. And I think in pursuing this career, just because it is so difficult at times, I think the only thing that's kept me going is just that knowing, that like 5-year-old kid in me who's like, no, this is what you do. Yeah, it's
For you,
yeah.
for you, Wyatt?
I mean, I suppose it initially started in the dress up closet in kindergarten, and prancing around the carpet during playtime. But then it definitely, it continued through, being read Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer and Peter Pan, and, having the opportunity to harness my imagination through these different art forms that aren't theater, but that are the same thing, storytelling. I grew up outside of DC, and there was a lot of opportunity to expose a curious, creative kid like me to the theater and the DC theater scene. So fortunately, I was able to do that, and it's kind of just, I think we're both so fortunate and grateful. Like, we've known that this is who we are and what we do since we were discovering language. And there's a lot of people who like never really figure out what it is that their contribution to the world wants to be. So as tricky as it is when you're in an ebb rather than a flow period of your life creatively or successfully, as far as like your creative work is concerned, like Todd said, recognizing this has always been who we are and what we do is incredibly special. And also, I'll add, when you're true to yourself, the people who are meant to be surrounding you are attracted to that. And I feel like from an early age, the kids who were into playing along with dress up were the ones who came and joined. And throughout my life, that's been the case, by one foot in front of the other, being true to myself and honoring, that this is what I do. It's allowed me to partner up with and create with the people that I'm meant to be able to do that with.
Love that. I meant to ask this earlier, but it was perfect from Todd mentioning coming to directing later. What was it like, not only working opposite him as an actor, but as your director?
Yeah. Oh, it was phenomenal. Todd's an auteur. He wrote this incredibly beautiful story that I relate to so directly, and he communicates with, as a director and as an actor, the clarity and the enthusiasm and support that Todd brings to every situation is so abundant and rich. It's just like there's a fertility to every single moment. It's like things are going to blossom and pop up all over the place because there's no one out there, tossing sand on the yard. It's just, he just creates an environment where you can share an impulse. And as a result of being supported and sharing an idea or an impulse, like you can take the work and the project ultimately to, a whole elevated place by engaging in that kind of teamwork. And it's certainly the case with him as a director. It's certainly the case with him as an actor. You do, when you've been doing this for years, you encounter people whose initial response to enthusiasm or excitement is it's not necessarily positive, and it just gets in the way of feeling comfortable, and doing the kind of work that we deserve to do, and that is supported by someone like Todd, who leads with love and appreciation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Todd,
and we're finished filming, so he didn't have to be nice like that.
The check's in the mail.
Yeah.
Who are some of the directors that you look up to?
Oh boy, you put me on the spot. I love Mike Nichols.
I was just gonna say, I was like, I'll answer this question too.
Yeah. I love Noah Baumbach. I know it's a little tricky to say. I was very impacted by Woody Allen's films early on in my career. There's just like a host of,
I mean, that's he made art. He did make art.
Yeah, I think what I am drawn to is anything that's character driven, and I think for me the mark of a great director isn't necessarily in the cinematic quality of the work, but in the performances. And sometimes directors get lucky, but oftentimes directors don't get lucky over and over and over again. And yeah, so those are some standouts. Greta Gerwig, I've been loving her work recently. Yeah.
And Todd,
I want to answer that question too.
Okay, you can say directors, but I was going to ask you about actors.
Oh, well, I will answer that as well happily. I also to the list that Todd just shared, I wanted to add that I'm a huge fan of Pedro Almodovar. I feel like he does work that is totally grounded, and at the same time, the circumstances become so heightened that it's all character driven, but it's characters in these intense situations, and I just find his work so inspiring and fascinating and shocking. But regarding the question about actors, I mean, I can't get enough of Bette Davis. I can't get enough of Cate Blanchett. Poor Todd has heard me going on and on about Tar all season. She's my ultimate. I think that she's incredible. I feel like any actor who like both of us, like has an appreciation for and is thrilled by working on stage and on camera, is someone who I find myself drawn to and in admiration of. And Bette Davis got her start in a stock theater company on Cape Cod. She was an usher at this theater. She'd been told by someone that she was being offered an acting job. She got herself from New York out to Cape Cod, and the theater company had no idea who she was. And they were like, someone played a cruel joke on you. But she had moved her life out to Cape Cod, so they gave her a job as an usher. And then the final show of this summer season, someone fell out and she went on. And as Bette Davis tells it, by the time she was going on in this play, she had been ushering all summer long. So the audience were full of people who knew and loved her. And she went out on stage and she felt their love for her coming up from the audience, and she embraced that. And she said that she brings that to everything, that she brought that to everything she ever did. Is that not such a fabulous story?
That is a fabulous story.
It's in The Girl Who Walked Home Alone, this amazing Bette Davis biography that is actually on my bookshelf right there.
I have a feeling it was probably nearby. That's really a great story.
Yeah, those are my two favorites.
Todd, do you have a next project to direct lined up?
Yes. I just finished writing my next feature. It's going to need several rewrites, I'm sure. But I am hoping to be in production with that in the next year or two. I've learned from Chrissy Judy that film is a very slow-moving beast until it's not, and then everybody wants everything right away. So yes, that is what I'm hoping to produce next.
I love that. And Wyatt, you're going into production on a play, correct?
I am. I'm not sure. Oh, that's the project you're talking about. That's a
the other
film.
John something. I don't want to pronounce it wrong.
I'm sorry. That's a short film.
It's a short film. I thought. Okay. Sorry, for some reason when it said production, I thought you meant.
Yeah, no, that's that is a short film that I'm going to be starting production on. Yeah, okay. And the final.
What's that about?
it's about the sort of the duality of hookup culture, how it takes an openness and a bravery to put yourself in a vulnerable situation when you maybe want to deeply connect with someone, and how that can be embraced or it can be shot down, and what that does to queer culture.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's a really cool piece, and it's a tricky piece to talk about without having the opportunity to see it. So that's all I'll say about it at this point. I'm excited. Yeah.
I love it. Well, I definitely would love to talk about After Forever on another show.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's going to be it's going to be, available. The whole season will be available. I think sometime this spring. So
yeah,
I would love
Kevin. He and I were gonna, plan a show. So I'll let you know.
Oh, please. Yeah. Yeah. Great. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, gentlemen, so good to see you both. Congratulations.
Thank you for having us on.
You are so welcome. Chrissy Judy is opening tomorrow in Los Angeles, next Friday in New York and San Francisco, and April 4th on video on demand. Everybody, please check it out. Have a great afternoon, you guys. And stay in touch.
Thank you.
We will. Thanks so much for having us on. Bye.
My pleasure. Thanks, everybody, for joining. Thank you to Todd and Wyatt for stopping by. Please join me tomorrow when As the World Turns alum Haley Sparks joins me from Sydney, Australia. And on Saturday, we will celebrate the 3rd anniversary of The Locher Room with Kimberly Sims and Emmy Award-winning writer Nancy Curley. If you haven't yet subscribed to my YouTube channel, you can do so down below. Turn on the notifications for reminders of all upcoming shows. And if you like to stream The Locher Room, you can do so. Just search The Locher Room on your favorite streaming platform. I will see you tomorrow afternoon, everybody. Have a great day.